everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Stacy, and I'm a bookseller and the events coordinator at Belmont Books. Belmont Books, for those of you who are not familiar with us, is an independent and locally owned bookstore in Belmont, Massachusetts. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that we have a number of virtual events coming up, including Lynn Reeves in conversation with Hank Philippi Ryan on Tuesday, and Quanah Jackson in conversation with Mary Pauline Lowry on Wednesday. You can register for these and our other events on our website, belmontbooks.com, which is also where you can purchase tonight's book, Carrie the Dog. If you have any questions for the authors, please type them into the Q&A section and we will get to as many questions as we can. We're very excited to welcome Stephanie and Caroline. I want to tell you a little bit about them and then I will turn the event over to them. Stephanie Gangi is a poet, essayist, and novelist. Her award-winning poem, Four, was published in the Hippocratic Prize Anthology. Her essays have been published in Catapult, Literary Hub, McSweeney's, The Woofler, and more. After years of writing fiction and poetry as a hobby and winning awards such as the Hippocrates Poetry Prize and the Jean Cooney Scholarship for Excellence in Fiction, Stephanie published her debut novel, The Next, at age 60. The Next was a finalist in the Writers at Work annual writing competition. With Carrie the Dog, Stephanie said, I wanted to subvert the cliches about how women age. I wanted to write about the myths of memory and the power of momentum. My lifelong interest in the intersection of rock and roll and photography provided the perfect backdrop. Stephanie lives in New York City. Caroline Leavitt is the award-winning author of 12 novels, including the New York Times bestsellers Pictures of You and Is This Tomorrow and With or Without You. Her essays and stories have been included in New York Magazine, Psychology Today, More, Parenting, Redbook, and Salon. She's a book critic for People, Boston Globe, and the San Francisco Chronicle, and she teaches writing online at Stanford and UCLA. Caroline lives in Hoboken, New Jersey with her husband and son. And without further ado, I will turn the event over to you, Stephanie and Caroline.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. So I'm Caroline Leavitt, and I want to say, like, what a treat it is, first of all, to be at Belmont Books, which is a wonderful bookstore, and also to be with Stephanie Gangi. I'm trying to remember when I first met you, but it's important to think about that because much like the book, I was in a place where I really wanted to know writers who were more in my age group. I seem to have been surrounded by 30-year-old writers, and I just felt like I need my tribe. And I remember when The Next came out and I loved it. And I don't remember how we got together for lunch, but it was like finding a long lost sister. It was so amazing. So thank you for that. I want to talk about Carrie the Dog first before I ask you questions.
Okay.
First, let's see, Meg Wolitzer said that Carrie the Dog was powered by insight and true wit. Richard Russo said, I can't remember the last time I was completely bewitched by a fictional character. Carrie the Dog just got a rave in the LA Times. Congratulations. It was the best book of the week from People, another rave. It's a Good Morning America online pick, which is absolutely fabulous. And it's going to have a lot more. So I want to talk about the plot a little bit before my question. So it's about this woman, B Seeger. She's just turned 60, or she's on the cusp of 60. She's the daughter of a really famous photographer who is now dead, who found notoriety by taking pictures of her children called the Marks Nudes. A lot of this made me think in terms of Sally Mann. But in one line in the book, one of the characters says, well, Sally Mann's kids were naked. We were nudes. There's a marked difference. So B has gone through her whole life, and now both Hollywood and MoMA Museum is calling. They want to reopen this storage unit, bring back the photographs, and that's also bringing back childhood trauma. So the first thing I want to ask you is, at one point, B is talking about the many failed selves that she feels she's been, which I found so interesting because she also has some successful selves that go along with that too. I got the feeling that B, just as she was being created by the photos her mom took of her, which were notorious, that she's still trying to create herself into an existence. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Caroline. The reason we know each other is because I kind of stalked you online, because I was always so impressed with how gracious you were, not only about your own work, but towards other writers. So I just was dazzled, and I always thought to myself, if I'm ever published, I want to be like that. Like, so generous, generous and big-hearted. So thank you. And now on to B Seeger.
Okay,
So
yes.
my idea about, when I hear that quote about the failed selves, I almost want to go back and edit myself, because I'm not sure failed is the word I should have used there.
She would think it was failed.
Yeah,
She
that's
would think
true.
that
The
the word was
character
right.
would. That's true. I am very taken with the idea, being a woman of a certain age myself,
Mhm.
with how all of ourselves kind of integrate. And you kind of get to 60 or so, and you realize that all those selves you were agonizing over and trying to find and trying to locate and trying to do better or falling apart, that's all part of the self you bring to age 60. I'm 65. And to look to the future, you need all those selves. And so I think taking stock at age 60, that phrase taking stock seems
Right.
kind of cliche or throwaway, but really it's about looking at your past selves and figuring out how to use them to help you move forward into the shorter future. Because one of the things she says is she realizes that what's ahead is shorter than what came
Right.
behind her. So
Right. You also wrote this amazing essay about how, in order to be a better writer, you had to embrace your age. And I thought that was so interesting, because I've been noticing myself, I'm more and more drawn to writing older characters. I just, there's like something really interesting about that. And also, one of the most highly praised works of fiction lately was the 91-year-old Hilma Wolitzer's book.
just publish short stories.
Today, a woman went mad in the supermarket.
Yeah.
So I think more and more women are, and more people hopefully are thinking that there's validity to that age, and there's a lot of knowledge, and you start to look at the good things besides the wrinkles and everything else.
Besides impending
how-
death.
But how scary was that to write that article? Had that been brewing for a long time?
Well, I'm a very late bloomer. I came to writing in my, well, I was always a writer, but I came to seeing it as a vocation in my late 50s, I guess. I think I was 57 when I started writing The Next.
That's incredible.
I know. It is
How
incredible.
did you get the courage to do that?
I have no idea. I just, as I get older, I get bolder.
Yes.
And that's not to say aggressive. It's almost an internal feeling of like, I got to do it if I'm going to do it. And so I kind of got to that point, and I realized, there are so many stories that I haven't read about older women that aren't kind of actually stock characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of phenomenal older women, and none of them are stock characters. In fact, I would say the women are outpacing the men in terms of aging with this kind of ferocity.
Yeah.
So I wanted to I really started thinking about it and writing about it. And it's been a good lane for me.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. And you actually write so brilliantly about women. The Next, your first bestseller, was about love and sex and women, but it was also about it's different from Carrie the Dog in that it also was about revenge. And I started to think about that, and then I realized that, do you think that revenge is just sort of reshuffling in your mind what happened in a way so you can feel that you're gaining power over it, which I think is something that flowed through both novels, where B is actually gaining power over her life and her
Definitely.
age and her destiny, which I just loved. I absolutely loved.
That's very, very well said. And I so appreciate that you appreciated that. I mean, first of all, in terms of the next, I mean, that character, I don't really have like a big angry streak. Like I might have it, but I never show it because I
Right.
was kind of conditioned culturally
Right.
not
to do
So,
it.
when I was writing the next, I kind of let it happen on the page, any rage and anger I was suppressing, I sort of let it rip there. And it was kind of really fun to write. And then for Carrie the Dog, B, I wanted to put on paper how she actually negotiates pain and anger. And she doesn't rage outwardly, except for one scene in the book, which I won't give away. And she has one kind of evening where she rages, but all of her anger and rage is subtle, and she's kind of coming into controlling it better. And I was also controlling it better, I think, as a writer, kind of writing those scenes. I was learning to control it better too. Than in the next, I'm just like,
Let's talk about V's voice. She dwells a lot and tells us a lot about her past and these traumatic photos that her mother was taking of her and her siblings, and how the father knew and nobody was interfering, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. But
Right.
she's also very much in the present.
Right.
So with present difficulties that she needs to go through and major decisions. So it's almost like a dual timeline of the past is just about to collide with the present. So what I wanted to ask you was how, I think that first of all, I think that a lot of people don't think that older women do that because they think we're all retired and we're just making bundt cakes or whatever, which is not true. So I love that you did that. But the second thing I wanted to know is, how did you do that as a writer? Did you map out these twin dual timelines and then sort of map them as they came closer together, or was it more organic for you?
I mean, I do a lot of timelines because, well, first of all, I'm an older woman and I forget what I'm doing. I have to have a lot of visual aids especially this book has a pretty long, there's the arc. It's basically a boomer arc, right? It starts in the very late 40s and goes to almost the present. So I absolutely had a timeline for every single character. But I think more to your point, when I'm writing scenes of the present, I'm trying to connect and channel memory that comes through a song she hears or a scent she picks up, or just a glimpse of somebody that looks like somebody. And I mean, I'm like this, and I bet you are too. Those things do spin me off into a memory. And
Right.
so I really tried to, this is kind of geeky craft talk now, but I really did try to, sometimes I close my eyes and just hit the keyboard because I'm sort of channeling what I would be seeing, feeling, smelling, hearing in that same moment.
You also told me that you read your manuscript out loud, which I found fascinating because my agent is making me do that. And at first I thought, why would I want to do that? And then as I did it, it's almost hypnotic.
It
right?
really is.
You get in the zone and you do hear the character's voice coming through you. So let's talk about memory. B is writing a memoir, but she can't remember a lot of stuff, which is so interesting.
Right.
So I wanted to know if you could talk about how that figures in with how we can sometimes write our way out of the dark, our dark.
So, I guess as I've gotten older, there is a Joan Didion quote. I think it's like, memory fades, memory adjusts, memory conforms to what we think we remember. So
Right.
I always think about that because to me, and there's other great writer quote, Barry Hannah says, memory, the whole lying opera of it. And I love that because memory isn't actually facts or truth. It's the narrative, not only the narrative that we told ourselves at the time, but the narrative that is morphed over time. Right? So we've softened some edges or we've sharpened some corners. And I'm complete, as many writers are, I'm completely fascinated with the process of memory and how we employ it to protect ourselves or stay stuck in the past or move forward.
Well, scientists have said that every time we remember something, we remember a memory, that memory changes just from how we remember it. There was this other totally fascinating thing in the book that somebody remarks that that the DNA of the mother remains in the child forever.
Microsphere is what it's
There's
called.
this symbiotic relationship, and there's this whole idea of cellular memory, what we carry and what comes out. That's completely interesting. So with this in mind, how do you personally know what's real in your life? And can you continue living your life if you don't know for sure? Do you grapple with that?
Well, the honest answer is I personally do not grapple with it, but I know lots and lots of people who do grapple with it. And, one of the reasons I was drawn to the topic, the subject matter of the book is, I often think about how fortunate we are in a sense that if there is trauma in the past, we in this country have resources. Most of us have resources and can access help if we are able to access our own need for help, right? But there are lots of places all over the world where people have far worse trauma than certainly I've ever had. And they still have to get up at 4 a.m. and walk 3 miles and get on a bus and go to a job to support their families, and they have to navigate around trauma. So that is a little bit of what I wanted to do with Bea. I wanted her not to be I wanted her to be therapy resistant in a way. She's not comfortable with that. And that's kind of typical for a woman of her age that maybe grew up in a certain way. She leaves home at 17. So she's not really, she's a little bit uneducated. She does a little bit of college, but it's not a no take for her. And so I wanted Bea to figure out how to be resilient without any help, all by herself. And of course, the love of the little family she brings together for herself, because she
I love that
little family.
Let's talk about that little family. I loved it. There's Echo, whose real name is Hannah, who is her sort of sister, who they have such a wonderful relationship together, which made me think that, what, women of all ages really should be friends. I mean, they really should.
Totally
but there's also the dog. I just love the dog so much.
Talking about this dog, it's kind of the dog is a little bit of an asshole, right? It's not such a nice dog as you would typically find, but they love each other.
They love each other, and it is like a lovely family. And they're even like her relationship with her ex Gary, there's still a connection there, and it's
Readers
still like
Gary.
I love that.
Readers love him, which makes me so happy because I wanted her, at a certain age, endurance counts. And they have been together for decades, on and off, but still
Yep.
have always supported each other in a certain way and always been in each other's lives and know each other. How many people at 65 can you say really, really know you? So I wanted to kind of pay homage to that endurance, a relationship that just keeps going.
It's interesting too, because her opening, when she talks about the past of her first relationship, it's, well, she's 17 and she's punked out and she gets in a car and she runs away with this rock star and it's exciting and bang, 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 bang. But her real relationship with Gary is this thing where, she visits him when he's not feeling so well,
Yeah.
and they have communication, and there's a real solid bond, and that's so much better. I mean, that's like one of the lovely things actually about aging, that our relationships take on this weight, this heft that's wonderful, wonderful. So I want to talk, Carrie the Dog is about a lot about the fallout the fallout in a family and how we live with that fallout. Henry, B's brother, talks about how he's not trying to change it. He's just bearing witness to it. And as soon as he saw that, I felt electrified, because I think that, first of all, as that's the right response, I think some things you can't change, but you don't want to bury them under the rug. So what's the alternative? The alternative is just say, it happened, I'm acknowledging it, I'm bearing witness to it, which I also think is what you do as a writer. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, that Henry character is a combination of completely repressed, but also that repression has led him to some kind of acceptance. And he's and that's what I was talking about earlier, about kind of how we each navigate trauma to get to resilience.
Right.
And that's his way. He does go to therapy, so he has, been helped. But I love listening to stories of some men, but mostly women, who have had to manage disappointment, trauma, loss, while still caring for a family and going to work every day, and in some cases massive trauma or loss. And so I really wanted Henry to represent somebody who has just come to acceptance. B has not, right? It's all stirred up for her.
She has not.
She's kind of at a fever pitch for a good part of the novel. But I think she ends up in a good place.
Yeah, I do too. So I want to talk more about the difference between the Mark's nudes and the Sally Man photos, because there's a lot of different stuff going on in that. If you didn't know the story and you just looked at the Sally Man photos, you think, God, this is really gorgeous art. And I imagine that you would think the same things if you looked at the Mark's nudes. But then the next question is, but at what cost?
Right.
What is the cost of great art? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, one of the little kind of origin story threads of writing this book was I had written an essay, and as I always do when I write about my children, or anything I write really, they're always my first readers. And this essay I wrote had a little bit of a thread about one of my daughters and a health challenge she had faced. And I gave it to her to read, and she was like, yeah, great, fine. And then it was out in the world. And this was around the same time that the next was published. So I was getting a whole lot of attention that I was not used to. And, it's a little bit overwhelming. And she was getting some attention for this little story in this essay. So we met at a bar, we were having dinner and a drink, and I said, wow, I'm feeling so kind of overexposed at the moment. And she said, yeah, tell me about it. Meaning that so was she feeling it from the essay. So we started talking, and, again, she had fully approved the essay, but who knows what happens once
Right,
something comes out in the
afterwards,
world,
right,
right?
right.
So neither of us had had any experience with that. So we got into a very, very interesting conversation about mothers as artists and artists as mothers, and who owns the body of the child until what age, and when do you have dominion and then give it over. And it was just this fascinating conversation. And that was a couple of years before I wrote Carrie the Dog, but it always was germinating for me. And so I started reading about Sally Mann extensively. And I had always been attracted to the photographs and never thought the photographs were pornographic, as she was accused of by she was literally,
Yeah, I know.
raided by the FBI.
Yeah.
And but Sally Mann's photographs, the difference you cited earlier, Sally Mann's photographs, her kids are naked in the pictures. Their personalities are very clearly on display. There's not a lot of artifice. It's very authentic and very real. But Miri, Bee's mother,
she posed,
stages the photographs.
Right.
So, and they're purposely provocative. And so that, I think, is, a key difference.
That's
and I'm a huge admirer of Sally Mann's, and I love her work, and this is not that kind of work.
Yeah, at one point, one character says, she was a great artist. That's not why she was, but she was just, the only thing she can be accused of is being a really bad mother.
Yeah.
Which she was, yet at the same time, she's not a stock figure. She's not cardboard. You feel that she's making these choices.
Yeah.
And the art is always taking precedence, and always because of something she does do in the novel, I won't give it away, she's feeling pain about her choices.
Yes.
So I want to ask you, do you take photographs at all?
Well, of course, I love Instagram, and I'm as susceptible as all of us to, the little, the moment. But
do you think they lie? Do you think photos lie?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do, because I think that, first of all, the photographer is framing the photograph, also taking many, many photographs and picking the one that delivers the message he or she wants to deliver. And it's also a moment that's frozen in time. So, and that things have happened right before that moment, and things will happen right after that moment. And none of that context is delivered to the viewer. And that is why the title of the book is Carrie the Dog, because it's about Carrie the Dog is the title of a photograph that Bee's mother has taken. That is the only photograph that Bee owns, because the kids aren't in it. There are children in it, but they're not her brothers and herself. And it is a picture of a boy and a girl, barefoot, almost like a Walker Evans photo, barefoot, in dungarees, like in the, I don't know, maybe the 50s, carrying together through Times Square in rush hour a dog. Like they have a big dog and they're both carrying the dog. And so Bee loves this photograph and wants to part with it, can't part with it. But that photograph to me represents the determination. And I think it represents that to Bee too, which is why she doesn't want to give it up. Because here are two kids who are clothed, and not her brothers and herself, but a brother and a sister making their way in the most unlikely scenario.
I want to say that both the descriptions of the photos that she took and the titles were so evocative. I love the titles: Nap, Car, Carrie the Dog. And I have an image in my mind of what I feel like I know what that photo looks like.
Yeah, me too.
I want to talk about how people, as well as photographs, can go from object to subject. And in the rave from the LA Times, they said something really interesting, that you showed that invisibility can be freeing. I would argue that B is not invisible as much as she's just changing her gaze. Am I crazy
So
wrong, or?
no, that's exactly right. I think that, I mean, even for me personally, my visibility as I've gotten older has increased to myself.
Mhm. And also
And
in the literary world, it certainly has
well, and
increased.
that projects itself outward.
Right,
And I
right.
didn't understand that all along the way. You know, I thought it had to do with looks and, you know, all the things that women are, you know, oppressed by in the patriarchy. But as I've gotten older, I have also enjoyed being less visible for things that I don't really care about being visible about.
Right. You're changing your gaze. It
I'm
doesn't
changing-
matter that, it doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, that stuff does not matter anymore. That's interesting. So I want to ask you, so now that you've got all these raves and buzz and everything justifiably going on for this great book, you told me before, I believe, that you're writing a thriller next. Is that right? How do you feel to
Say
change
trying
that?
to write a thriller. You know, I'm not going to talk too much about it because I am super superstitious, but yeah, I'm trying to write a thriller about a marriage and men and women and money.
Oh,
So
right. You told me that. That's right. That's right.
yeah,
That's such a great
so
idea.
I'm so fascinated with the fact that, you know, 80% of marriages that end in divorce because of financial pressure.
Financial stuff,
And
right?
yet I don't think I've ever read a novel, contemporary novel, about that topic. So I don't know, I'm going to try that.
Okay, I want to tell everybody who's out there, please put your questions in the Q&A. And I'll go back to asking my questions now. So I want to know, I mean, I know the answer to this, but I think it's always interesting to hear this. So how do you work? Do you show your work as you're writing? Do you have rituals? Do you have a set count? Tell us about that.
I don't have a set count, but I definitely have a set timing each day where I try to write. Right now it's gone to hell. You know, it's there's so much other stuff going on that I'm sort of not focused on novel number 3, but I do try to sit down by 7, you know, and I don't get up till 11:30 or 12, and then I take a break, and then I read what I've written, and I try to land in a place where I'm ready to pick it up the next day. So I often stop in the middle of a scene that I understand very well
Right.
where that scene is going. So the next day, instead of going back and reading everything and getting slogged, you know, just caught up in old edits and revising and tweaking every line and making it perfect and musical. And I do try to pick it up right where I left off. That is something I had to learn to do, or I would never finish a book. You know,
Yeah, I think that's was it Hemingway who said that? You always want to stop like when it's good, because otherwise you're not going to want to go back to your desk. You're going to feel like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
You write poems too, as well as
Yeah.
essays, and I want to know, like, is there any kind of writing you don't do? I mean, it seems like you do everything.
I'd like to do some screenplays, but that doesn't seem to be happening. I love essay writing. I've really do not have an MFA. I don't go to writing workshops. And in fact, I'm very excited because in 2022, I'm going to be mentoring MFA students at Stony Brook. So that's
That's wonderful. What does that entail? What does that mean?
So I get paired with a student who has a finished draft and work with that student on bringing that manuscript to completion. And so, yeah. And, you know, I do developmental editing, and so I'm always in the world of writing. And it's, I course corrected like really late in life.
Yeah, but you got the right course. You got the right course.
Just to go back to remember we were talking about reading out loud?
Yes.
So that habit comes to me from poetry writing. because I would always read the poems out loud to make sure that
Right.
they had the rhythm and the music I was trying to go for. And so it just became a habit, and I find myself wanting to as best I can, capture similar rhythms and music in prose. But I do walk around reading. I had, up until July, I had a very dear friend, dog friend. And for 14 years, he listened to me read. I think he thought I was a little crazy, but, I just pace around reading out loud. Anyway.
I love that. I also love that all of your books are Valentine's to New York City, which, that's where my heart particularly is. Um, could you ever imagine writing about a different place, setting a novel in a different place? And if so, where?
Of course, Italy. I've been there the most of any other place I've ever been. And the very first thing I wrote when I was in my very early 20s was a thrillery short story about Jamaica. I was on vacation in Jamaica, and it captured my imagination. And I actually sent it at the time, I don't know how I was so brave, to Esquire. And the fiction editor at the time was Tom Jenks. And he sent me a note saying, "Not quite for us, but try again." Now, in the olden days, first of all, today, if I got that note, I'd be over the moon, right?
Right,
but
of course.
Back then, I didn't know anything, and I was a kid, and I heard that as a rejection.
Oh, that's so funny, because I have like writing clients who will get what they feel is a terrible rejection from an agent. And I will say, you're reading it wrong.
Yeah.
Because even though they're saying, well, it's not quite right to me, they're saying, I didn't really like the ending, but keep going. I'm saying, so write back to them, tell them you'll revise the ending, and will they look at it again? It's so important to realize that.
Right. And I was too young and inexperienced, and I just thought, oh, I was rejected. And then it, stalled me forever.
Let's talk about rejection and the writing life, and both as an older woman. That kind of rejection actually bothered me personally a whole lot more when I was younger. It would devastate me. Whereas now I just feel like, screw you, it's your loss a lot of times. How do you deal with that now? Have you found that that's the same for you? Is it different?
I'm a little bit sensitive mostly because I always have like a ticking clock in my head, because I started so late, and I feel like I still have so much I want to accomplish. So if I get it, sometimes it's not rejection per se, it's silence, or another one of these try again things, or it's not quite. My agents, who I adore and value for this, pushed the next back to me like 3 times. Not there yet, not there yet, not there yet. And I'd never published, and I was like, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. So I don't love rejection. As you know, when you submit a book, when a book goes out on submission, is what I mean. That is a very extremely nerve-wracking time.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's terrible. So I did get the come to Jesus moment conversation when my agents told me I had to, if I wanted to be a writer, I had to develop a thick skin. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's hard.
Done that, but it is definitely, it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, it's really, there was one question in the discussion questions in the book that I found really interesting, where it said the initial draft, I'm not going to give anything away, but I have to know the answer to this question.
Okay.
In the initial draft of Carrie the Dog, Bea and Henry grow close. Henry is her brother, and in fact decide to live together. you made a big change to that relationship's arc very late in the editing stage, because originally it was a tied up with a bow ending, which first of all didn't feel organic to B's own arc, and second of all, I can't imagine you writing a tied up with a bow ending.
Right.
But I am so curious about, so what was the, without giving anything away if you can, what was the original ending? And how did you know that it wasn't right? Did you just have kind of a gut feeling that it wasn't
So I
right?
definitely had a gut feeling. I sleep really well at night, and I was not sleeping well chewing over this ending. By the way, the book was already purchased by Algonquin.
Oh,
And
okay.
I hated this kind of very neat ending, which was a happy ending.
Oh
And
my God.
I wanted it to have an upbeat ending. I wanted it to lift at the end. I won't say upbeat. I like lift better. And I went back in and I talked to my editor and said, I'm not happy with the ending. And he said, try it again. And I did. And, again, I'm kind of new to all this, and I don't know, are you allowed to say, I want to change the ending now that you've
Yeah,
bought
no
the
one
book?
tells you, no one tells you that you
No one
can.
tells you anything. But I knew it wasn't right. And B had already done enough work, I felt, that she didn't have to now take on the work of this new relationship. I'm not going to say too much more because it's the ending, but I wanted B to glide a little at the end instead of still be, working.
Oh, I love it. You're going to have to email me more privately, more detail, so I can know that. I want to tell people again, we have time probably for 2 more questions. If anybody
Great.
has questions, put it in the Q&A, or you can also put it in the chat if you want. I can say that. So I want to know, like, in terms of, Miri very much thinks of herself as an artist. She has a whole persona. That is who she is. So I want to know how you think about yourself as a writer. I know you said you came late to life, but
Very late
do
to it.
do you feel like certainly you have, but do you feel like you've earned your place?
Some days for a few hours. I mean, I don't remember who said it, but I once somewhere along the way read something that said, you're not a writer unless you're writing. So this period of all the work around Carrie the Dog has kept me from I can write essays, and I've been working on short things, but I do love and live for now and thrive under the conditions of being completely immersed in a novel. Like, I love novel writing. And so I'm not doing that right now. So, I wake up and the first thing in the morning, I feel is guilty because I'm a good Catholic girl. And I'm like, I should be writing my novel. But, I mean, I have grown into it, frankly. It took me a while. I had 15 years in corporate America. So I left that persona behind, just like B. I left that identity behind, and now I've taken this new identity. And, when I talk to friends who feel stuck, it's something I always say, which is change direction. And that doesn't mean, it doesn't have to be a radical departure. It could just be adding a track. But something has to change. And
Yeah.
I feel like I did that. And, this is now probably too personal and too much information, but, my kids are very proud of me. Like, they were out of the house and I suddenly became a writer.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's actually really interesting. So let's talk about that.
The minute I got rid of them and was no longer actually I'd had always been in very intense, close relationships with men, and since I was a teenager, and, I had a couple of husbands and a very serious boyfriend after my marriage. And honestly, my own fault, nobody else's. I couldn't clear away the psychic space when I was looking after children or looking after a man. I was not good at that. And the second all that went away, I felt free enough to take on
That's
new challenge.
incredible. That's incredible. So you became an artist late in life when you had the space to do that.
Right.
That's really, really interesting because Mary's
I'm the
feeling is that
opposite of Mary.
it's the opposite. She felt that art was more
Yeah.
important than her
Yeah.
young children. But also it's interesting when you have this other persona, because I remember the first time my son read one of my books, it's a really frightening
Yes.
feeling because they know you as one particular person.
Yes.
And when they read your book, then all of a sudden they know you.
Yes.
Like very
I met up with one of my daughters after she read the first draft of the next. And I walked into the place we were meeting, and I looked at her and she made like a face like that. And I said, when I got close to her, I said, "What? You hated it?" And she said, "It's so dirty." So I thought, all right, well, that might be bad for a daughter, but not so bad for a reader.
Right. That's really funny. I just,
Yeah.
I've never spoken to my son about my work because I sort of don't want to know in
Yeah.
many ways. So I want to also talk about the whole thing about the storage space and in the novel.
Yes.
Because the storage space for me is very much a metaphor of memory.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What we keep, what we don't keep, what it meant then, why we hid it away in a storage space and why we take it out. Can you talk about like where did that idea for the storage space come from? Because it's
I'm so glad.
Perfect
I'm
metaphor.
so glad you noted that, because I am divorced and have, at this age, I have a fair number of friends who are divorced, and to a woman, including me, at some point we have all had to go deal with the post family home storage space. Right? You sell the house, split the proceeds, stuff goes to storage. None of the women, including me, had help with that. There was no ex-husband next to them digging through and sorting through and throwing out and dust and dirt and memories. And I kept hearing that story from other women. And I had been through it too. And so that storage space metaphor was always kind of nibbling at me. And I thought this was kind of a perfect way to transport myself back to those memories so that I could use that and really make it very real for B. Do you know what I mean?
It was great. There was something so haunting about that.
Yeah.
And you drew at the suspense because we were waiting for her to open the storage space and see what's there. And then she does, and everything just opens up.
Yeah.
We have a question from Katie Eisenberg. Thank you, Katie. It says, do you find that poems come from different memories than novels? Is one more imagistic or a phrase? That's a good question.
It's a really good question. Hi, Katie. I actually don't think that, for me, it's that different. I think the imagery drives me first. In fact, I will admit to going back to poems. In fact, I just did this a couple of days ago for an essay I wrote about nostalgia. I went back to an old poem I had written about the experience of cleaning out my parents' home after their deaths. And that poem drove the essay. And I still know I'm going to use that same imagery elsewhere and, more. So I don't know that I have, for me, it's not that separate.
Okay. All right. So I want to tell everybody out there that you really, really, really want to buy this book, Carrie the Dog. You can order it from Belmont Books, which, or your favorite wonderful indie. But since this is Belmont Books, it's a wonderful indie, and you should order it from them or any other books.
Oh, yeah. And like this book.
Oh, stop.
This book, I loved it. It was one of my favorite books of last year. Seriously.
Thank you. So anyway, please order the book. Please order it for Belmont Books. It's such a magnificent book. I was telling Stephanie that I bought a copy to give to my son in Brooklyn. Thank you so much for being here, Stephanie. It's always wonderful to see you.
So lovely to
Thank
see you,
you
Caroline.
so much, Stacy at Belmont Books. It's just a wonderful time.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie and Caroline. This was a great event. And Stephanie, we wish you all the best with this book.
I
know
appreciate
you
that,
will
Stacy. I love booksellers. Love them.
well,
right.
we love
Bye,
you
guys.
authors too. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye. Thank you so much.